We do these arrangements in this way because we are then during this year going to be having a new student funding model.
Higher Education Minister Blade Nzimande has pledged to fund each and every student who qualifies for NSFAS funding and has been accepted by a tertiary institution. But he talks tough on students who don't make satisfactory progress.
This matter of the missing middle is being finalized within the comprehensive student funding model process, which I've said we're hoping to go back to Cabinet by the end of the financial year.
The so-called missing middle, though, will have to wait for some time before the government and the entire higher education sector arrive at a decision. So where does that put higher education in 2023? The minister is my first guest. We look at some of the work taking place behind the scenes to vet what some say, is what stakeholders will have to deal with respect to the state of readiness for higher education in 2023. A little later on, I'll also speak to student formations who weigh in on the pronouncements that the minister made earlier today. The Watchdog starts now. The Minister of Higher Education, Blade Nzimande, addressed the media and other stakeholders this afternoon to talk about the plans for 2023. He joins me now on the line. Minister, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, to you and your viewers and listeners. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with something our newsroom was picked up on first, which was that when you told the briefing that NSFAS funded students will register without paying upfront. Now, does this apply to all prospective students who have been approved for an NSFAS this year, or does it include also those who had already been funded? In other words, this will not be their first university year. They have been part of the system and have been funded by NSFAS.
Yes, thank you very much, Fuyo. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. It's all NSFAS students. And NSFAS students each year, this time of the year, are in two categories. It's those who are entering for the first time, often as first-year students, and then those who are continuing, in other words, who have already been in the system. All of them have got the same arrangement, that they don't have to pay any registration fee upfront. And in any case, NSFAS takes care of a whole range of things that they are given. Firstly, is the registration fee. It's the whole tuition fee government pays. It's accommodation, government pays for that. It's food, government pays for that. In some instances and cases where there is no accommodation, there is assistance with transport. And then there's also payment, by the way, for a learning materials allowance, which some call the book allowance. And then there's a monthly stipend that the students actually get. It's a very comprehensive support for you. And in fact, I would like to say this without fear of contradiction. I know of no other developing country that does what we do, perhaps with the exception of Cuba, given that it's a socialist society, it's different there. Even developed countries, those who normally say that they've got free higher education, they often talk just about tuition, but students, where they stay, how they travel to universities, the food they eat, it's all their responsibility. Usually free education means free tuition. In our case, we really go quite comprehensively in supporting students from working class and poor backgrounds.
Now, over the past a couple of weeks especially, we had fears being expressed and appeals being made to you and your department to please ensure that there are no students who get, financially and academically excluded because they haven't paid in full, and some of those students haven't have had challenges. Some of the civic society organizations have said because they didn't do well because of COVID when things changed. Some had to, study from home in an environment that they were not familiar with before, which then affected their academic performance. What's the situation with respect to that, shall I call it, category of students who had been funded before, but who haven't done well over the past couple of years, especially?
Well, Vuyo, I'm not exactly sure which categories are that, but let me just try and answer your question this way. That all NSFAS funded students are being paid for. And there is no question of owing. There is a small group that is on its way out that was started studying before 2018, before we introduced this comprehensive bursary. Those also we had made sure that they don't get excluded, but they sign a loan agreement with the institutions. So that is one category of students. The other category of students is what is called the missing middle. Those are students who come from families whose income is beyond the threshold of NSFAS. In other words, beyond the 350,000 rand
and I want to
annual family income.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to go next, Minister. But I just wanted clarity on this one, because I mean, you've had organizations like your Foundation for Education and Social Justice in Africa, which said they had approached the department because there was this group of students that they were worried about who haven't done well over the past few years, and they were worried that, they have been or were going to be financially excluded, and they need all the help you need. You don't know anything about that group of people?
No, not that as far as I'm aware of. We do have rules, for instance, that apply in relation to NSFAS students, that they cannot be able to fail now, we say, more than once. We allow them to fail once in the system. If they fail twice, then they are out. That's inevitable, because that's what bursaries normally do. You support students that are progressing. Students that are not progressive, they must get out of the system and allow those who are actually able to progress. The issue has been those students who come from families that do not qualify for NSFAS, but are not wealthy enough to be able to comfortably pay for university fees. That's a category that is normally called the missing middle.
Yes.
That's one category we hope some arrangement will come up, possibly in the form of a loan, because government is committed to support working class and children from the poor, which is government policy, just like all other policies on social assistance are like that. Whether it's the social grant, the child grant, the grant for the elderly, all our grants as government are focusing on the more vulnerable. Then what we are looking at now through the ministerial task team that I appointed as part of coming up, led by Professor Mtose of the University of Zululand, as part of coming up with a solution to the missing middle. We then, as I have said, you also quoted this, are going into cabinet, hopefully by end of this financial year, so that then a final decision can be taken on this. But in the meantime, what we are going to be doing now is to do what we've done in the previous years, which is requesting, working with institutions, not to exclude those students who can't pay, but they must sign a loan agreement. We're not happy about the growing debt, but we have no other option because of the category of students that we are actually supporting. And also what we have done this year is that from the National Skills Fund, we're going to be setting aside money to support students in the missing middle category, but who are in scarce skills areas, your engineering, your health sciences, your animal sciences, because We also want to support students in areas that are in high demand in our country. And of course, we will also direct them to other opportunities for bursaries. And there are many of them. Government departments and also municipalities, and provinces, they also offer bursaries. The SETAs also, year before last, they spent around 800 million rands in supporting missing middle students with bursaries, those who are in particular areas where the SETAs feel that there is actually a shortage. We are still going to be doing that in the beginning of the year. We are working very closely with our institutions. We have also been consulting with all the key stakeholders, student leadership, the trade unions, the vice chancellors, the college principals, and so on. We hope then that it will be the last year that we are having to do this without a student funding model that would be in place that will then say, how then do we deal with the students who do not qualify for NSFAS? What kind of assistance can government be able to arrange? Not provide, but to arrange, because our policy is focusing on the children of the working class and the poor.
What is holding that? Things up at the moment. In other words, what challenges are the people who are involved in trying to find a solution to this problem still experiencing? Because it's been with us for the past 5 or so years now. Where's the delay?
Well, first of all, if you're talking about the last 4 to 5 years, we were still just grappling with the challenge of NSFAS. Just to try and develop a system of NSFAS that will reach far and wide, which is what we've achieved now. And then you have this challenge of the missing middle. I appointed a ministerial task team in 2021, which has done work that we've taken with recommendations to Cabinet in September last year. Cabinet said, fine, we can see these recommendations. Now that you have informed us what the recommendations are saying, before we further discuss this matter, take it back to the stakeholders to check with them what are they saying about this recommendation. So I've been consulting with students. We're hoping to do this by the end of last year, but between September and the end of the year, there wasn't enough time because there's lots of discussions and engagement that are needed. Now we have consulted. We are now in the process of finalizing that consultation, tying up the loose ends with the aim that by the end of this financial year, which is end of March, we will then have gone back to Cabinet to say, here are the recommendations, here are what the stakeholders are saying, and then for government to be able to take a final decision on a comprehensive student funding model.
Would one be correct to say the biggest issue, or perhaps the elephant in the room, is the fact that the student debt at higher education currently stands at 16.5 billion? And I think if I remember correctly from the briefing earlier, it said it costs us more than R1 billion to service that debt a year.
Yes, it is huge debt. We are very concerned about that. In fact, that's another matter that Cabinet has asked that I look into and come with recommendations soon after then submitting on the comprehensive student funding model so that we see how we can actually deal with student debt. Because student debt is mainly owed to universities. It's money that universities are supposed to be using to expand the academic program, to build infrastructure, and actually to make a whole range of other things. Of course, it is also a burden on students because they owe, they still have to pay. So the level of debt is rather too high. We are concerned about that. Although I do need to say that no capitalist country, if truth be told, can be able to avoid completely the issue of debt, especially for students who don't qualify for government assistance. In fact, in many countries, you just have to manage the debt, but students take debt like we used to do before with NSFAS, and they pay back when they are actually working. Such systems are there, and that's one of the things we are looking at in relation to the missing middle, because government has no policy of free higher education for everybody. We can't afford that as a country. It would be a wrong thing to do, that my children will have to be paid for by government. But at the same time, we understand that there are parents who do not qualify for NSFAS, but who cannot comfortably afford to support. So a mechanism must be found, because we are a caring government, a mechanism that must be found that is viable, that is sustainable, to be able to support that category of students.
Speaking of NSFAS, but also some of the problems you've touched on associated with NSFAS, where people were able to defraud the system. How happy are you about how NSFAS has been handling all the problems we have seen over the years? For example, has it been able to identify some of these people who can afford but who are using NSFAS to fund or find ways of getting NSFAS to fund the education of their children at the expense, of course, of the poorest of the poor, as they're often called? Have you been able, has NSFAS been able to find the culprits, students now we're talking about more specifically, who have been abusing, the system, using money that's meant to go to their education, to fund lifestyles and a host of other things, fraud and corruption that had been identified? Are you happy with progress being made, if any, with regard to those problems?
Well, firstly, I'm happy about the role that NSFAS has played in supporting poor students and students from the working class. This is one of the biggest achievements of this government since 1994. To actually support poor students. As I say, there is hardly a country that is doing this, and we are very proud of this. But indeed, there are challenges, that there are people who are robbing the scheme. NSFAS itself actually identified quite 1,000, I don't have the figure now, already last year, of students who are using NSFAS but do not qualify for NSFAS. What I've insisted now is that those people must be criminally charged, because it's very unfair that parents who can afford are able to defraud a scheme that is meant for poor and children from the working class. What NSFAS has not adequately done is to take up this matter further with law enforcement agencies. That is what I've insisted now. Mm-hmm. They must go to law enforcement agencies and charge the people who are defrauding. So I'm not happy, because there are still leakages in the system. There are still people who use their grandmothers, who are SASSA recipients, or grandfathers, when in fact their parents are professionals. Mm. I mean, that's completely unacceptable. And parents are usually part of that. That they want to be supported by government when they know that government is not supposed to be supporting. Mm. That's why we hope that with coming with a solution for the missing middle, perhaps it will reduce this pressure on illegally raiding the coffers of NSFAS. So I'm not happy about that. And that is why even today I was calling on NSFAS to say, you have identified, those who have identified, please, they must now be reported. Criminal action must actually be taken, because that's fraud and corruption, if truth be told.
But do you appreciate, both the need to actually find this, not only find these people, but for them to be prosecuted becomes important for you and your department? Because whether it's those who are defrauding NSFAS, or whether it was you sensitizing parents about bogus institutions. You didn't want them to call them fly by night. but the need to actually identify these institutions and get people behind bars for defrauding the system and, trying to squeeze money from struggling parents in many instances who just have nowhere else to, for one reason or the other, to take their children, or whether we're talking about, corruption within NSFAS or within the department as of allegations of gone. I mean, the importance of finding these people, making sure they're prosecuted, and setting an example becomes important. Otherwise, you are being looked at as someone who's, all talk and no action.
I agree with you, Vuyo. In fact, it's government's approach, especially under President Ramaphosa, that we must fight corruption wherever it occurs. Doesn't matter where. From the high levels in government, to ordinary people, to professionals who are actually cheating, we have to fight corruption. That is why it's important that the corruption that is within NSFAS or within our own system, whatever form it actually takes, has to be fought relentlessly. And that is very important. I agree with you that all those found wanting must actually be able to be called to account through take action that is being taken, through criminal actions and so on. Whether it's the NSFAS or it's issues that have arisen out of the Zondo Commission, for instance, as government, we must just be able to fight corruption at all levels. There is nowhere that it should actually be acceptable in society. If we don't do that, I'm afraid our country is gone. It will be taken over and be run by a mafia, and we don't want that. And we think that as a country, given where we come from, the struggle we've waged, the challenges that we have, the high levels of poverty and inequality, it is very important that state resources go to where they are meant to go.
Minister, I have a few questions from viewers watching. Noguku says, when will the NSFAS applicants know if their application has been approved? Some universities are open for registering and we don't know what to do now, waiting for NSFAS.
Well, Vuyo, today, actually, NSFAS has announced of the continuing students where they have actually received confirmation from the universities and colleges as to who is actually going to be funded. But this process, of course, may take a little bit longer with some because institutions have not yet provided results. Because NSFAS must know what are the results of the students that are being funded. Have they passed or failed? By how much? Then they are able to make a decision. But the first set of decisions have already been made in relation to SASA recipients. Those have been informed that they will get NSFAS if they get admitted. Then today, the NSFAS released the results of continuing students who are actually, and they'll continue to be doing so as confirmations by universities and colleges actually come in. It's very important that that be done so that we don't delay the start of the academic year, so that we are able to start as soon as possible and be able to continue with the task that we have, which is learning and teaching in our institutions.
Let's take a couple more, if we can. Savelo Biela says we have a problem as students who studied postgraduate diplomas. NRF does not fund postgraduate diplomas. How can the department help us in this case?
Yes, that's true. Savelo is right. We don't fund postgraduate diplomas generally, but we have already identified that as a challenge. And what we have done in the past and commit to continue doing is that, for example, this relates to what used to be called BTech in some instances, which is now called an advanced diploma from the universities of technology. If students are in scarce skill areas and they require that BTech for purposes of professional registration in engineering, in health sciences, in life sciences, we will actually support them. That is what we've even said now, that even students from TVET colleges who then want to continue to university, even if they were getting NSFAS at TVET, we are actually going to be able to support those students. But also, I must say that postgraduate studies are funded in the main by the National Research Foundation, which falls under the other department that I'm responsible for. We have already made some interventions there. We have already said to the NRF, please prioritize students who are receiving NSFAS at undergraduate level. We have also said, please increase the funding such that we are able to fund as close to full cost of study as possible. Because we are trying to say, students who come from poor background and been funded by NSFAS, they should actually be given priority at postgraduate level. But there is one thing we must make very clear, that we are talking about students who have been admitted for postgraduate studies. Because postgraduate studies, they've got their own requirements, by the way, which usually are much higher than when you enter for a first diploma or a first degree. I know that most postgraduate programs, they require 60% pass, and others even more, higher than that, because of the demand on postgraduate. So it can't be then that people think, if you've been an NSFAS student and you got 51%, you are then going to be admitted to postgraduate. You have to meet the criteria for admission at postgraduate level. Yes, I must admit we do not have enough money for postgraduate as I would like to have, largely also because the demand is much bigger at undergraduate level in terms of taking students from school to be able to do their degrees, diplomas, and other certificates.
Quick last one. Minister Kelvin II says, I'm an NQF 4 student with a 16K debt because I was financially excluded for last year because of poor performance. I'm only left with 2 subjects to complete my computer science certificate. Any kind of assistance will be appreciated. I don't know if...
Well, we normally engage our institutions if we were to say, such cases, much as the student is legitimately not going to be funded because of poor performance, has not met the requirements. But where students are in final year and they are finishing, we have urged institutions, although this is an institutional decision now, can't be a decision that we just impose from national. Try and get those students to acknowledge that, and you take them so that they're actually able to continue and finish, especially if they are left with 1 or 2 courses. We are saying that to institutions. Now, the reality, though, is that institutions do not have same capacity to be able. One university can be able to do that. Another university is so poor. If you are talking, for instance, of former black universities, where more than 90% of the students are all NSFAS, it's very then difficult. There is no space, there is no extra money. If you take debt, it affects a whole range of things. But we have engaged with the institutions to say, let's also look at those cases, such that cases like those, we allow as much as is possible for the students to leave the system having completed.
Minister, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Vuyo. Once more, I really appreciated this opportunity. Siyabonga.
Okay, Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Clayton Zamande, on the back, of course, of that briefing he had this afternoon, where he briefed journalists and stakeholders on the state of readiness for higher education in 2023. Up next, Student Formations reacts to what the minister had to say this afternoon. Following the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation's state of readiness for the academic year of 2023 briefing earlier today, Student Political Bodies weigh in on issues affecting students directly. And joining me now for that conversation is DASO's Leonard Malisa, EFF Student Command's Sandiso Buthelezi, and SASCO President Vezintlandla Simela. Evening, gentlemen, all of you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Bravo, and good evening to our viewers at home.
So, your thoughts about what the minister had to say today overall? Happy
No, thanks, Pravuyo. I think as South African Student Congress, we are partially happy, I must say that, especially when it's come to NSFAS students. Minister indicated that all qualifying students who qualifies for NSFAS will be able to register in all our universities, whether they've got the historical debt or not, so long as they qualify for NSFAS, they will be able to register on that. I think on that part, we are quite happy as a student movement, but of course, where we still have an issue, and I listened to you when you asked the minister about why the issue of missing middle has been an issue for quite some time, and in terms of how they've answered, it is when then we are not quite happy as an organization that even today we are still going to be faced by that issue of a missing middle, because if you recall for the past few years, NSFAS has been positive as much as there were some issues there end of NSFAS, but the main issue that maybe even engaging students on protest was in relation to the missing middle. And by the look of things, even now, we are still going to be faced by that particular issue of a missing middle. And then thirdly, I didn't hear the minister speaks about issues of student accommodation, because student accommodation, as much as we understand very well that it's a process, it cannot be addressed in one day. But it's quite important for us at least to hear positive thought about how then they are planning to address the question of student accommodation. But other than that, as I said, that we're partially heavy, but there are these issues that I'm 100% sure that towards the end of our registration, we are going to see something that we don't even know what it is, because there is no clear indication in terms of missing middle in specific. Because you heard that also the minister spoke about the funding model that has not been concluded. We did believe that if maybe we are able to conclude the funding model, maybe we are going to have a solution in terms of the missing middle.
Of which the issue of the missing middle, is a part. For you, Sandiso?
No, thank you very much, Voyo, and your viewers at home. Firstly, it's necessary that we congratulate all our matriculants and teachers in the high school sector for outstanding results, pending the dire and uncertainty coming from basic education. So we also appreciate our high school desk for outstanding work in making sure that they put pressure in the basic education sector to release the matric results. But now the minister, we have really heard him. He said a lot of nothing. So there is nothing we can expect from the Minister of Higher Education, Lady Zimand. He does not address issues of funding for postgraduate. He does not address the issues of the working, the building of the infrastructure in the universities and the new universities, the accommodation, particularly in TVET sector. So there is nothing the minister is addressed. So our position as the Students' Command, really, it means the EFF Students' Command in its program of really has to do everything to make sure that we really assist in the academic and financial exclusion that comes with all of these issues. We speak on the issue that the registration has started on the 16th of January, but it's only today where the global NSFAS criterion has been released, meaning the majority of the poor and the African students are only allowed to register today on the limited spaces that has been left for the poor when the privileged students have already registered. So we have issues, but the minister has said nothing on all of these issues we are confronted with. There is a serious anxiety and depression among students, especially those who have recently received their results. So the minister has never touched on all of those issues which comes from the fees must fall struggle and all the aspirations of young activists and students who are languishing in poverty, in unemployment, as we have all the unemployed graduates who are standing on the street looking for unemployment. So all of those issues have not been touched. So it lies upon us as the Students' Command to counter all of those issues.
From where you sit, Leonard?
Thank you very much. Now, man, you see, Blades is using a reactionary approach when it comes to funding crisis that we are facing in this country. Look, the funding crisis that we're facing, they didn't emerge overnight. That's one point we need to understand. And I was listening to him. I pointed two things there where he did not go deep or address this kind of. He was speaking about colleges. Most of the time on that briefing, he was speaking about colleges, and there is nothing that he said about the accommodation in all these colleges. There is nothing speaking about Wi-Fi on all these campuses in the colleges. There is nothing that is speaking about the re-equipment of workshops in all these colleges. So his approach, it's a blanket approach because colleges, they play an important role in our sector, especially in this country, in the sense that those students who are coming from colleges, they are the ones that most of the time they benefit more as soon as they complete their qualification. They have that easy access to make sure they get job opportunities. But Blade is not accommodating colleges at all. But as I move, I would say there is an issue also of postgrad, which is stated about missing middle also students that they are going to create a loan and all these things. Look, as it does, so we've been always giving this Department of DHT solutions to this funding crisis that we're facing in this country. There is no way forward on how postgrad funding is going to be established. How will these people acquire the qualifications? What is the strategy? There is no strategy. You mentioned something about increasing allowances by 5%. He's speaking of when you 75 rand. Look, you must understand, since we had COVID-19, I will tell you, if you go to shop right now, that price of oil, it's not the same as the price that was in 2018. Our students cannot be this thing.
Okay, we've lost your line there, Leonard. I'm hoping we'll be able to re-establish it. But have you had opportunities to engage as student formation, like the department, the minister, on these issues ahead of a day like today?
As the student movement, SASCO, I think we might be quite honest with you. We've been having some conversations with the stakeholders in the form of department, but of course, when you are in a registration period like this, you know, at all material times and every time, we always focuses on the pending issues. Of course, we don't speak about issues of how can we best address the question of missing middle, as I've said, because that missing middle is an old question, you know. Every time when it's come to January registration, we speak about how can we best register allowances and stuff like that. We do believe that post the registration, we need to have a sit down with all stakeholders in the sector to speak about how can we best address questions of student accommodation. Comrades are correct when they speak about accommodation in TVET colleges. Even today, I can tell you, Bravio, where our students from colleges reside, we can't even stay there as a person, but there are monies being paid for that accommodation purposes. And we are quite not happy about that as well. And we've always, as a SASCO, fought for the standardization of accommodation across
which you spoke about today, by the way. I mean, at the lengthy briefing that he addressed, at how I think he said NSFAS also wants to get involved, and so do universities, because truth be told, the country is not getting, you know, bang for the buck that it spends. You've got to standardize, but you also have to scrutinize, because there are unscrupulous players within the system. I think he did speak to those issues, but what I'm trying to understand is whether these opportunities don't present themselves for you to be able to engage with the department, with the minister, with the universities and everyone, so that, as you were saying earlier, all this doesn't come again every January, you know, when we have to talk about this. Are there no such opportunities? Because if there aren't, then we have a big problem in our hands.
There are opportunities, I must say, and you know that there is a union called South African Union of Students, where it's the combination of all SRCs. As SASCO, we do deploy in that union, and that union is the one that on time to time has a conversation with department, because that is a non-partisan organization. But on time to time, we're able to engage with our union and, of course, infuse our ideas in terms of what we think should be happening in the sector. And I think your question, I think we need to have more direct now in terms of our self-student organization and the Department of Education. We need to increase those opportunities so that we're able to air our views, so that when things are done, at least we're able to say, this is what we have contributed as a student movement direct to the Department of Higher Education.
And I thought of exactly the same thing, Sandy. So when you were talking about the like NSFAS, the application process, because my understanding is that application process, started last year, and the days that universities came up with, within which people should apply, and then there are like the provisional acceptance. There's a whole process that doesn't start in January. Would you say, without any fear of contradicting yourself, that generally students do make sure that they make use of those opportunities, but not only that, but do so timelessly?
There is a serious crisis in the higher education sector, particularly in the TVET sector. You will tell me that over 1 million students have applied for admission, especially in the NSFAS sector. Now, the minister confirmed that over 800 will be admitted and registered. Now, what becomes the solution for the other affected students? Now, I can tell you the ANC government and the higher education sector presides over a deliberate exclusion of the African child coming to the public sector education. Now, when you compare the higher education sector with the basic education sector, you will tell me that the basic education sector says the public, the admission and the pass rate is 30%. When you compare it to the higher education, it says it's a 50% admission. So it's a deliberate exclusion which is caused by the administration of the ANC. When you say the registration has started on the 16th, already all of those, the privileged students, already they have registered. Now, when these ones who come from the public sector, the TVET colleges, I tell you, they are already finished with their registrations. So what becomes for the students who just matriculated when they come to the institutions already is closed? So it's all of those issues which comes with the establishment. But now, when we speak of the funding criterion, it's a disaster and a bizarre to tell a student in a public sector that is going to be funded by NSFAS when you have to wait for the NSFAS to fund you at a later stage. Already you will have to secure your space in the university. Now the university uses its prerogative to try and exclude all of our African students. So now the late applications, as the minister has said in his briefing, that DUTM, UT, Rhodes and other institutions, they are going to conduct late applications. It's not a fact, because already they are secured and done with their applications. So now when they are already saying and proclaiming that they are not going to allow late applications, so minister is lying. So it's a nature of the ANC and the SACP yellow communist to come and lie to our students. So it then becomes our responsibility as the EFF Students Commander to make sure that we fight and make sure that all of our students, no deserving student is excluded academically and financially in these institutions of higher learning. So the minister also speaks on the funding of the postgraduates, that the NSFAS is going to sit next week, Tuesday. So when the NSFAS is going to sit next week, Tuesday, it's going to determine all the funding criterion. But already the minister has spoken. So there is two centers of power between the basic.
Well, if I understood him correctly, he was saying that NSFAS, he didn't he wasn't going to get into the detail of it today because NSFAS is going to do that next week. So he was giving a broad overview, and then various stakeholders, including NSFAS, will then speak into the detail of what they have to do within their respective little corners. That's my understanding of what he said.
Vuyo, please excuse my network coverage. It's the backlog and the deadlock of the load shedding. Please excuse my network coverage. Perhaps I can miss some other points. But it's a correct overview that really, when NSFAS is going to speak next week, it's something that's happening even in the so-called liberation movement. When you want to segregate the energy ministry and together with the ministry presided by Pravin Gordhan. So when you want to segregate it and you want not to have a solid power on terms of channeling all of these issues, so you are going to have issues. When you have NSFAS reporting to Department of Higher Education, but they are going to put all of the issues on themselves. So it's going to bring issues on ourselves as the students in the institutions of higher learning. Because NSFAS now is going to direct on us. When they say they are going to reverse the funding criterion and they are not going to find over 800 students, what is the minister going to say? So it's an issue that has come that must be addressed in a South position, but there is no South in this position. There is no SASCO in this position. So they speak in contradictory processes when they speak of issues. One, they accept the minister's note. One, they say they have issues with the minister's note. So the option really becomes the students' command. We speak on pertinent issues which confront students on a daily basis on campuses.
Leonard, I mean, staying with the admissions issue, which the minister too acknowledged, remains a problem. Apparently, there's this pilot project. I think it involves 5 universities at present, and I think there's a new group that are also going to come onto the party, including your Rhodes, your Fortes, and so on. Currently, it's your Sefako Makatos, Val, and a few others I can't remember off the top of my head now, which he says has actually gone some way in trying to deal with this problem of admissions. In other words, if my reading of what he was saying is correct, it's only a matter of time before that problem is also eased.
Yeah, well, if you look, like I said, the issues that we're facing in the higher institution of learning, they didn't emerge overnight. Ladies speaking the same language each and every year, and there is no action that is doing. We have students who are coming from deep rural areas, over there in Zaneni. We have students from Sikisike Bizan that couldn't apply last year. So now those students, they've been disadvantaged because the universities are not doing enough to reach those deep rural areas. Now we are saying the universities must open late applications so that those students that are coming from those deep rural areas are able to apply and secure their space. Now, one other issue when it comes to what Blake says today, there is an issue of load shedding that we are currently facing in the country. So now we had students that couldn't apply because of those kind of things. But what I want to understand from that statement he mentioned of he's going to have a working committee with the MTT where they're going to find a way on how are they going to deal with this issue of load shedding as registration is starting. There is no plan that he has put in place regarding the issues that we are going to face academically. So load shedding has been affecting students left, right, and center. Now, students have been faced with load shedding. Blade comes says he's going to increase the pass rate requirements for a student to be able to be funded next day. How do you increase the passing rate to such amount of 55 while we have a crisis where students are being affected academically? So that means students cannot be able to reach that level of saying we're going to pass with 60s while we have a load shedding, while we are busy writing a test. Okay. ESCOM has been there is implementing a permanent stage 2. So if ESCOM is implementing permanent stage 2, what are the plans that the DHT has for a academic year of 2023 to make sure that admissions, registrations, the academic year moves smooth. So I'm just disappointed by how Blade has approached these issues of students that we're facing in the filing.
Gentlemen, we've run out of time, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds each. Let's talk solutions. What do you see as being your role this year? Now that, over the past few years, it's been more of the same, and no one seems to be dealing with the issues that matter. Where do you see your role? What are you going to do that's within, your means and abilities? 30 seconds.
No, thanks, Pravio. I think on time to time, we'll not lose hope. We'll have to encourage our government so that they can have a conversation with us, not only as SASGO, but with all student information, so that at least when we provide solutions, we provide solutions as a collective. I do believe that we are going to have that arrangement where all of us will sit down and engage, because at some point we don't want a situation where we are forcing government to sit down with us. It must be in terms of the conversations, because once you force government, at the end, you're going to sit down, we're going to go back to the table and sit down. So it should be the government that itself take that initiative as well to say, can we have a conversation with our student leaders? Because solutions are not going to come from government alone, but are going to come from us as student organizations, especially to us as young people, because people
are directly affected.
Who are directly affected, of course. And generally, young people are agents of change. That's why they want to see change immediately. So it is us that are going to come up with proper ideas in terms of how then do we transform our society. Thanks.
Sandiso?
We want to encourage all deserving students to go to all institutions of higher learning and TVET colleges to go and work in. The EFF Students Command is readily available to assist all students with all academics and financial exclusion, and make sure that all our issues are addressed to make sure that we absorb all of our students. Now, we must make sure that we fight the South and the Department of Higher Education with the cadre deployment in terms of the 3 billion that has been confirmed by the minister in terms of assisting with students friendly and disability grants. So all the artisan projects and contractors that has been mentioned by the minister is no program other than cadre deployment and the corruption that has been happening without disruption in the Department of Education and Training. So the EFF Students Command has engaged on its Zufunda Ngenkani to make sure that we fight for all of those issues and we participate in the worldwide struggle to complete eradication of imperialism and colonialism in all institutions of higher learning. Let's make sure that we insource our workers and we give justice for Mlungisi Madonsela, and we congratulate the EFF for making it to 10 years thus far. So,
Leonard?
Congratulations to the EFF.
Thank you very much. No, ours is very simple. Look, Blade needs to come up with a tangible plan on how is he going to deal with the issue of load shedding in the institution of higher learning so that we have a smooth academic year. So that is the first step that he needs to deal with before he starts increasing requirements to 55%. He must first look at how the academic year is going to be able to move smooth. Another thing is that as it has, we're saying, the historical depth of students, it needs to be cleared, it needs to be cancelled. We have students that have graduated, they cannot acquire their qualifications because the university is holding their transcript and their qualification. They cannot apply to a bursary. So we're saying, yes.
Let's leave it there, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your time this evening. That brings us to the end of tonight's show. Thank you for watching. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time.